Welcome to the Lead Change podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Mulcahey. I'm an orthopedic sports medicine surgeon with a huge interest in contributing to the growth and development of other leaders. On this podcast, we will share stories from many leaders in all medical specialties to understand the skills necessary to be an effective leader. We'll celebrate their success and hear about strategies to overcome hurdles. We will also highlight some of the unique challenges faced by women in medicine who are interested in pursuing leadership positions and the importance of mentorship, sponsorship, and allyship in achieving and being successful in those roles. Let's work together, build on shared experiences, learn from those before us, and use these lessons to propel us forward in our career. Let's lead change. Welcome, everyone, to the Lead Change podcast. We're coming to you live from the 22nd European Society of Sports Traumatology, Knee Surgery, and Arthroscopy, or ESSKA Congress in Prague. I'm very excited to have Zhanna Kovalchuk on the podcast today. Since 2012, Zhanna has been the Executive Director of ESSKA, which again is the European Society for Sports Traumatology, Knee Surgery, and Arthroscopy, and this society is based in Luxembourg. Before that, she had an academic and business career, 6 years being faculty at the National Linguistics University of Ukraine, and 7 years of running her own business in the field of education. Zhanna is highly competent in management and experienced at converting strategy into function. Her skills include leadership, strategic planning, organization management, strategic communication, and marketing. She is active in the nonprofit world, and she currently serves as chair of the AC Forum Community of Practice of CEOs. Besides work, she likes art, opera, sport, traveling, being with her family and friends, and flying ultralight airplanes, which is very cool. I initially met Zhanna when I had the pleasure of visiting ESSKA headquarters in Luxembourg City, Luxembourg, as part of the ASM to ESSKA Traveling Fellowship in 2022. I remember very distinctly how welcoming she was to all of us, inviting us, honestly, right into her office for snacks and tea. We had this beautiful ESSKA mug. I remember that very fondly. And she also shared information with us about the rich history of ESSKA and some of the special cultural aspects of Luxembourg. I've since had the huge pleasure of working with Zhanna through various ESSKA-related activities and through ESSKA's partnership with AOSSM and ISACOS. I'm honored to have Zhanna with us to share some of the many leadership lessons she has learned throughout her career. Zhanna, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Mary, for such a kind introduction. I'm happy and I'm privileged to be here with you, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to get into this too. So we are definitely going to speak about your role with ESSKA, of course. But before we do that, I was hoping you could actually share a little bit with us about yourself, really, where you grew up, your educational background, and kind of what your initial career interests were.
Oh, wow. Great questions. And a difficult one to answer. Who are you? Where were you born? Where do you come from? In short, third of my life, I lived in Russia. 1/3 of my life, I lived in Ukraine. And now 1/3 of my life, I live in Luxembourg in Western Europe. This is basically who I am. Originally, Russian-Ukrainian, Luxembourg citizen, living there for the last 14 years. So that's where I come from.
And then I wanted to ask you too, just share a little about your education. When you were studying in college, what did you study? And as you were going out and starting your career, what were you really thinking in terms of like your career aspiration?
Originally, I'm a teacher. So we have a strong teaching tradition in our family. So my father always wanted me to be a teacher and teach at the university. And actually, I ended up teaching at the university. That's my first education. But since I remember myself from the age of 12 approximately, I have always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I did that as well. So I opened my own company and I ran my own business. So I've ticked 2 boxes. So one is being a teacher, another one being an entrepreneur. And that somehow led me into my current position, which is, in a sense, a mixture of both worlds, because you deal with big groups of people. You have to be able to organize big groups of people. And at the same time, you need to be entrepreneurial because you're in charge of a big society and you always have to think ahead and think what else we can do, how we can differentiate ourselves from the others, how we can remain relevant for our community. And here, a lot of entrepreneurial skills come at use, I would say.
Yeah, that is really fantastic. I would never have really thought about that, but it does make a lot of sense. So even just going back to what you were saying initially about where you grew up and those different parts of your life and those experiences, I'm sure absolutely shaped, of course, who you are now, but your experience, your interests, and where you are in ESSKA. And so you bring a really unique perspective. But I love that too with the education and being an entrepreneur, how critical those combined skills are to be so effective in the role that you're currently in. And you hit it on the head for sure, like being in that role and leading such a large organization. Like you said, it's critical to always be thinking ahead, to be innovative and think about different ways to collaborate and just to approach things. So I really love that. I never thought about it as kind of an entrepreneurial skill.
So grew up in Siberia, so where the climate is tough. So that replies for resilience, I would say.
Chicago winter is nothing to Siberia. But in the introduction, I mentioned that you served as faculty at the National Linguistics University of Ukraine for 6 years. So that's incredible. I had no idea before preparing for this podcast. So what did you teach while you were there? And what were some of the main lessons that you learned during your tenure as faculty?
I was teaching linguistics and translation, and I was a very young teacher. So as a very young and unexperienced teacher, I was given the most difficult groups. Little I knew at that time, and these were students who challenge you. You even don't know that they challenge you. You discover it later on. But because I was so focused into helping those students to grow, to learn the subject, and I was so much passionate about my work, and my focus was there, that I really didn't realize that they were challenging me. So in the end of the day, these were the best relationships ever. So, and I think teaching at the university and teaching difficult groups of students taught me a lot. The human factor, the fact that if you are passionate about what you do, you can give this back to other people. And if you're good in what you are doing, you can also give this back to others. It also taught me to overcome challenges very early in my teaching career. And actually, I enjoyed that time.
Yeah, that's wonderful. In that role, you have the opportunity to have such a huge impact on so many people. And I'm sure they really valued that. And I love too that you said, well, I didn't even maybe realize how much I was being challenged at the time, but then you can reflect back and say like, oh, well, what did I learn from that? And those are hugely valuable skills I'm sure that you have carried forward in your career. And you continue, you face challenges now in a completely different way, but still that helps with kind of preparing you with the skills.
The profession of a teacher is very important, and the profession of a doctor is very important, because the first one deals with your soul and the other one deals with your body. And if you mess up with one of those, it's not good for a person. So I think these are professions which require a good heart and passion and vocation for what you do.
Yeah, an excellent point. I completely agree. So following your time teaching, you ran your own education-related business for about 7 years. So what was the focus? I mean, I know it's centered around education, but what were the main goals? Kind of what did you do in that business?
So obviously it was related to education because I was in the educational field, and it was the International Center for Education where we were teaching foreign languages, all foreign languages you can imagine. And we also were teaching translators and interpreters. So it was a special program for translators and interpreters to train them up to the European standard. And it was the time where this profession was still needed. Now I think the AI and all sorts of software and programs replaced it completely. But at that time, it was still needed. It was also a translation agency.
Wow. And so that was really focused on Europe, or were these services provided internationally too?
Those services were provided in Europe mainly. We had few international clients, but that helped me actually to move to the world where I am now in orthopaedics and associations world, because my team was doing simultaneous translation at the orthopaedics congresses in Warsaw, in Poland at that time. So we're doing simultaneous translation in 4 parallel rooms. So that was my team. And that's how I got involved very closely with orthopaedics. And that's when the leadership of ESSKA at that time noticed what my company was doing and involved me in some projects, because at that time ESSKA was expanding into Eastern Europe. So my previous profession or business gradually brought me to where I am now.
That is very interesting. I was definitely going to ask you how that transition happened. I wanted to go back to one point how you were saying that your company and the skills that you were using in a variety of formats actually were used for simultaneous translation. And for anyone listening who may not be familiar with that term, at big meetings and at Congress, like outside of the United States, these big type of meetings are called congresses. And people there who speak multiple languages. And so there are translated like systems that will translate what the speaker is saying. The speaker may be speaking in English, and then it can be translated to Polish or French or Spanish. So that is what's meant by simultaneous translation. So that is hugely helpful, so important, and obviously makes it so that attendees can actually learn and gain a lot from being there at the meeting. So that's incredibly important to have that available. I had no idea.
It is hard to believe, but some of my interpreters actually went to OR to see which ligament and how it is called, to be able to professionally translate during the scientific meeting.
That's amazing. That is amazing, because medical words are not everyday language, right? And most people are, I mean, for me, yes. And I mean, Zhanna now says a lot of these words every day, but most people don't. And so that's great that the translators were putting in that extra effort, because it makes it that much easier, fluid, and then they're going to be more accurate too in pronouncing the words, because they're difficult to say if you're not familiar with it or you don't even know what the surgeon is referring. I was going to ask specifically how kind of the opportunity arose to transition into this role with ESSKA. But as this was happening, what were your initial thoughts? Like, as you were considering this position and this transition out of your business that you owned into this very significant role in ESSKA?
Retrospectively, where I'm now, thinking retrospectively, I think it was such a right choice and a timely choice. But obviously, when I made that choice, I didn't know. I just had the feeling that I'm doing a right thing. So being an entrepreneur is a roller coaster. So it's not a secret. It's not a surprise. And just to give you an example, I opened my company, and 1 year later, there was a massive economic crisis. Everything collapsed, and 80% of companies got bankrupt. And we were in that 20% survived companies. But I remember that time it was tough. It was very, very, very tough. That also taught me to reinvent yourself almost like immediately. And what shall I do to remain relevant? And I think that's, to a certain extent, I was able to bring to ESSKA to constantly think, what shall we do to remain relevant for our community, for our members, for our orthopedics world? So it was a roller coaster, and it was ups and downs. But at some point, after 5 years or so, you feel that you reached a ceiling. And then you think, what is my next step? And I had a choice of expanding business and moving towards Europe. And I was considering partnership with the European Commission to bring my graduates into European Parliament and organizing internships for them, and then essentially workplace in the European Parliament or European Commission. So I was at this stage of negotiations, and it was quite a big step to do, because I had a very small team and a big desire and a big passion to do things and to do things well. And I remember I was just sitting and thinking, shall I go in this direction? Yes or no? Or maybe I should just come down and say, okay, let the business be at a level where it is and try something else. So I was exactly at this crossroad when I received a call from then the president of ESSKA, Professor Nick van Dijk, with an unexpected offer. I remember it was November. Hi, how are you doing? And I have a question for you. We have a vacancy. Would you consider? It was that call. And I said, why not? Why not? I'm right now thinking, where do I go? And perhaps it's a time for a new page. So I did keep my business for a while still, but ESSKA allowed me to transition gradually. And I thought, okay, if it's not for me, I will feel very early that it's not for me. I can always go back to where I was. But it was a new challenge, new field. I knew nothing about non-for-profit, and probably it was good for ESSKA, because when I arrived, I looked at ESSKA as a company and I said, okay, what needs to be fixed? At that time, it was what ESSKA needed, because the society was growing so quickly that the administration part of it and everything what supports the growth was not yet in place. Probably that's the biggest challenge when you grow fast, but you cannot catch up with your own growth. This is really not a good thing. So I would say I was at the right time, at the right place, and probably the right person for ESSKA. And I hope this is this is not just my feeling.
I think so. Yes. But that was so much great information. And I want to unpack a couple of things that you said. So going back actually to that point where a lot of related businesses, a lot of linguistic type businesses, these translation, a lot of them went out of business, and you were in a small group of 20% that stayed in business. And what do you think it was about your company? I just want to raise the point that you touched on staying relevant, but what do you think it was about your company and the ability of your team to sort of adapt? How do you think you guys did that?
Very good question. I'm sure there were several factors, but maybe two I can single out straight away. First, of course, you think, okay, what is happening? It's crisis. Everything is falling apart. What do I do? And then the question I ask myself, what unique service I can offer nobody is offering, which remains relevant in this environment right now. And that's what my company did. We offered special training for teachers or those who studied linguistics who wanted to transition and become interpreters and translators. So because these are two different skills, knowing the language and being able to translate freely, these are two completely different skills. And a lot of people in a crisis were looking for new skills, and that ensured that all educational programs we put in place were filled. So actually, when it was a crisis for some people, for us, it was an opportunity because a lot of people were coming and trying to learn new skills. So that's one thing. And another thing, which I also keep up to now, sometimes you need to humble yourself and sit down and think, okay, I want to be here, but the reality is such. So you need to be able to cope with your ego. And yes, I had an amazing office in a business center, in a city center. Great to open a company like this. But when the crisis comes and you sit down and you think, okay, so that's the idealistic picture, but where am I now? Do I need it? How can I change this so my business survives? And it's bit of a humbling experience, when you have an expectation like this and then you have to go a bit below and reformat yourself. I strongly believe this is still a very good quality now and then, especially if you achieve something fast or you just achieve a lot or you grow in your profession, in your career. It is important now and then just to stop and question yourself. Am I still in touch with reality? And it's a very humbling exercise. So I do it now and then.
We're talking about that as a specific example related to your business. It's very clear, obviously, how that translates to ESSKA, to also medicine in general, and just being able to adapt in the face of challenge and seeing really, you say this as an opportunity. How can we regroup? How can we reframe that? So I love how you approached that. And yeah, you do. You have to be humble and just say, what can we change? How can we adapt to this? And, when you transitioning back now to when you made this transition to ESSKA and you got that call, and I wonder when you were thinking about this, did you say, did you feel ready to take on this role?
I knew I'm capable and I had no doubts that I will do a good job. And I knew what is most important for whom I will be working. I already knew some people from a leadership through my previous engagement as a translation agency. So I really admired those people because I met the whole group of highly motivated people who challenged me as well. So hardworking people, great achievers, interesting characters, strong characters. I thought, wow, I would like to work for people like this. And that was one of the factors that was in favor of this decision.
I love that. And I love the point here too, is that you were very confident, right? And so that's the thing. I think we tried to make that point too in general on the podcast is be confident in what you're doing and don't feel like, I have to have these 15 skills perfected, but you were very confident going into the role and knew you could be successful. And so that's a huge part of taking on a position like that, being in such a high level of leadership. So I love that you emphasize that point.
That at at the very early stage, I had a great support. And I would like to say again, thank you to Irv Bamberger, a former CEO of AOSSM, because he was the one who thought, just come over, spend a few days with us and see what we as a society are doing. Because the non-for-profit association world was completely new for me. It was useful for ESSKA that I had business skills, but I had to learn what association actually means. And at that time, to find a mentor, basically that's how I can call him, and who is so open to share professional experience, to talk to you, it was a huge help. And I'm really grateful that at very, very early career, I flew to Chicago and I came back with a whole pile of, at that time, printed folders to go through. And that really helped me in the beginning.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That is amazing to have that kind of collaboration and mentorship across societies. And those relationships are so important. So that's fantastic. As you officially took over as executive director of ESSKA, what were some of your main goals? What were some of the things that you wanted to try to help implement, adjust, change, just kind of take the lead on as you transitioned into that position?
Your question is more relevant for where ESSKA was maybe 5 years ago. That's when you ask yourself, okay, what are my goals? What is my strategy? But when I started at ESSKA, there was no strategy, or there were first steps to build up a strategy. Actually, Professor Van Dijk was the first president of the society who established strategic meetings. When I arrived, as I mentioned earlier, so the society was growing so fast, but things were falling apart. So because you don't have the strong team, you don't have the office who is capable to manage such a big growth. So normally associations, how do they start? They start with volunteers who are passionate about the idea. They would like to do something great. That's fine. Until a certain point of time, they do the job themselves and they are scientific chairs for the programs. They organize everything. They're secretaries of the associations. And then when it becomes too much, they hire a secretary and then another secretary and another secretary. At the time when I arrived, ESSKA had 4 or 5 secretaries, but things were still falling apart in a sense that, you're like juggling with the balls in the air and you try to catch all of them. And at some point they start falling. And then you realize that having more people in the office doing secretarial work is not actually what the society needs. You need a competent team with different sets of skills. You need the foundation. That's what happened when I arrived. So I wasn't thinking of a strategy. I was occupied with a lot of operations and a lot of cleaning and preparation. And the first 2 years, it was 24/7 just doing that. So I'm kind of an executive director who came from the bottom of secretarial work and managing everything up to the level where now I can say I have an amazing team. I don't need to be involved in operations anymore. Although I like to know what's happening, but I have already a luxury and a privilege of really doing strategic things, big things together with my leadership, because I have a team who are extremely competent in their domain, each in their field. So that's the start, and that's where I'm now.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I think that's so important too, to emphasize that you came in, and the key thing is that you sort of assessed where was ESSKA and what were the needs, and really focused on that. And, having had exposure to ESSKA over the past 4 years, it is just incredible. The team is incredible. And clearly that comes from the top down, but everyone is amazing, very committed, just excellent at their jobs, very thorough, detail oriented. And that helps with all the operations of the organization. Like you said, it makes a huge difference. So
absolutely.
That's incredible.
You think of strategy when you have a strong basement. So you have a basement first and then you build your building as tall and as big as you want.
That's a great analogy. In the United States, at least, right, only about 7% of practicing orthopedic surgeons are women. I know there's some variability, of course, around the world, but the number just in general gets a lot smaller as you get to the highest levels of leadership, presidents of societies, etc. And although I don't have the specific numbers off the top of my head, I imagine that there are very few women serving as executive directors of major medical societies. So I wonder if you can share with us a little bit from your perspective, what does the landscape look like at the highest level of leadership in many of the organizations that you interact with on a regular basis? And what has your experience been serving as executive director of ESSKA over these past several years?
I entered the boardroom and I was the only woman in the room. So that was 14 years ago. And now we have women on the board, women chairing committees, women in the sections, and we will soon have the first female president of our society. So that's a huge shift and a big change. And it did happen because we put some effort as a society. We knew that there is a void we need to fill, and we knew that we need to do something about it. And it required somebody who has a vision, and we had such person, Professor David Dejour, who had this big idea to put women in orthopedics as his priority, and that's how Women in ESSKA initiative was born. And that made a huge difference. So that's talking about orthopedics and my job specifically. But if you look around at the medical world, since now I'm involved also in AC Forum, and AC Forum is the professional organization for association professionals. I'm in charge of the community of practice of CEOs. I would say that 50-50, which is a very good sign. Perhaps the difference is that women executive directors and CEOs normally grew into a position, while men executives and CEOs very often were appointed from outside. I don't know if it matters or not, but I'm happy to say that in my professional world, now association world, it's more 50-50. So it's not that bad.
Wow, no, I had no idea, but I love the distinction that you made too. And this is not, I know you're not speaking in generalizations, but just looking at the groups really as a whole, that a lot of the men were appointed to those positions and the women kind of rose up within the organization. So you saw that difference, at least initially. I don't know if that has changed at all, but very interesting. But just in general, fantastic that it's 50-50. That's fantastic. So, and I know, I mean, even just in some of our major sports medicine organizations, obviously you and then Sue Reinbold with ESSKA. And so it's just wonderful to see that, to bring that perspective. And so I just congratulate you guys for doing an amazing job. So this has been amazing. I do want to round out the discussion with asking you a few questions that I like to ask all of my guests. So this podcast is called Lead Change. And I wonder, Zhanna, what does lead change mean to you?
Lead change. That's a very good question. Do what you like. Do what you are passionate about. Try to be good in it. Don't forget the human side of you when you are a leader, because very often we are overwhelmed with our ambitions and goals and achievements, and we want to be there. And it's very easy to lose the human side on this journey. So the humbling exercise is useful here. So I think that's what lead the change means for me.
I love that. Thank you so much. And then I wonder if you've read any leadership books that have been particularly impactful or influential to you, or just in general, if you have any suggestions on resources that can be used to kind of really help develop leadership skills.
A fan of classical literature, and specifically the Russian classical literature, because I think through this work, you are capable to learn about human character, you are capable to learn about human life situations, and you are capable to get what you need in understanding how the world works, how people interact. So I learned probably from reading a lot of classical literature. I'm interested in philosophy and psychology. That also helps. I do not specifically read a lot of leadership books which provide you tools and options, and mainly tools and pathways into leadership. But I strongly believe in mentorship as well. So I always look at people around me who are great achievers in some field and who are passionate about what they are doing. I think passion can lead you far if you're really passionate about it. I remember myself at the age of 12, I say, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to own my own company. And I was so passionate about it that it helped me to achieve what I wanted. So I look at people like this and I try to learn from them. I try to exchange. And I do have very few, but I do have mentors along my way as an executive director of an association. And one of my mentors recently shared his book with me, How Big Is Your Map? It's his book, Carrie Adams. I'm not sure if you can buy it, but it's a very small edition. He shares only with very close people. But it basically means, how big is your maps? What do you want to achieve in life? What are your goals? How bold you are in dreaming about something. And that's quite an interesting exercise when you take time and you look at yourself and you think, how big is my map? And can it be bigger? And what can be in this map? So that was a book I recently read, and it was a practical one. And I filled it up and I put the, not bullet points, but balloons of what I want on my map. And surprisingly, it was a very, very long list. So I was happy to see that I have a long list on my map and that it's big enough. And you asked me, what's my superpower? And I think one of my superpower is to make bold ideas work.
That's fantastic. Like, I think that that's incredible. And you raised a lot of great points, but I think too, just to highlight all these different ways that you can learn skills that you then implement as a leader, that maybe you're like, this is not a defined leadership book, but psychology and psychology type books, classical literature and what you've extracted from that. And then this whole idea of dreaming big and having mentors, but really, really dreaming big. I think that's absolutely critical, is to never limit yourself, but just to think big. And when you do, like, big things happen. So that's amazing. You have mentors and other people that support you. And when you share your goals with people too, that makes it that much more likely that they will be achieved. So that's fantastic. And it sounds like a great book and a great exercise to kind of go through and really
It
think
was a
about.
great exercise, and you can do it at any stage of your life. I think your map will change, but that's even more interesting.
Yeah, that's key. Exactly. You do it at this point, 5 years later, the map is going to be completely different. So, Zhanna, it has been a huge pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and some of the many leadership lessons you've learned throughout your career. I think everyone listening will be motivated, inspired, and better equipped with skills to be a more effective leader. And thank you all that you do for ESSKA and for the welcoming and very inclusive culture that you create. So from my initial connection with ESSKA members and leadership, I have felt like I am part of this family, even though I live in a completely different part of the world. And I think that's a huge testament to your leadership and the commitment of ESSKA as a whole to support and promote collaboration amongst the global orthopedic sports medicine community. So thank you again for being here, and I really hope you enjoy the rest of the Congress.
Thank you, Mary. It's my pleasure. And that's exactly how we want every member feel about ESSKA, that we are inclusive, we are offering opportunities, we are open. Please come, learn, be with us. And I hope that many, many more people feel the same way as you feel.
Oh, I'm sure. And please, for anyone listening, if you have not yet attended an ESSKA Congress, you need to put that on your list of things to do. 2 years from now is the next Congress, which will be in Sweden. ESSKA goes to Scandinavia. ESSKA goes to Scandinavia. And that is when Dr. Berta Burr will become president of ESSKA as well. So a lot of reasons to attend. So thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And thank you so much. I appreciate you being here.